Welcome to Beyond Names. I'm Dr. Habīb. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not yet sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine God, Yahweh, Allah, Elohim, Brahman, higher power, great spirit, or you're still searching for language that fits, you are welcome here. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with introduction of our conversation partner for this episode, Dr. Frank Rogers Jr., who I'm so glad to have here. My heart just explodes when I'm in the presence of Frank. Frank was on my dissertation committee when I was doing my studies at Claremont School of Theology, and is just an exceptional person. So thank you for being here. Dr. Frank Rogers Jr. is the Muriel Bernice Roberts Professor of Spiritual Formation at Claremont School of Theology, co-founder and co-director of the Center for Engaged Compassion, and also the author of Cradled in the Arms of Compassion, Practicing Compassion, Compassion in Practice, The Way of Jesus, Finding God in the Graffiti, Empowering Teenagers Through Stories, and The God of Shattered Glass, a novel. To learn more about Frank's work, please visit the Center for Engaged Compassion.com. Thank you for being here, Frank. Welcome.
Habib, thank you. It is such an honor and joy to be with you. And you are one of those people that my heart just explodes. I beam when I am around you as well. Just very, very grateful.
Well, Frank, would you start us off by telling us a little bit about your spiritual story?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my last book, Cradled in the Arms of Compassion, really is my spiritual autobiography. It's really the spiritual journey from trauma to recovery. And I love your phrase, the spiritual misfits, because it's in many ways I kind of felt that way too. I'm a cradle Catholic, kind of raised in Vatican II Catholicism, and was really influenced by the contemplative traditions of Henry Nouwen and Thomas Merton, and the justice traditions of Dorothy Day and Daniel Berrigan and Philip Berrigan and the others, but yet also kind of really felt at odds in the church, and partly because I'm an abuse survivor, and I was abused in and out of the church, and so here this place that was supposed to be, and at times was, this amazing place where I could feel connected to some sacred reality that would be with me in the midst of the horror of the abuse, was also a place that was betraying, and so I never felt completely embraced and within it. And so my spiritual journey is really been my lifelong quest to find spiritual resources to recover from trauma and from childhood abuse. And so that was my quest. I went to college, to study religion, really to seek God. I mean, I want to know where is a credible understanding, a credible sense of a sacred reality in a world where children are abused and violence happens in so many ways. And it's been an unfolding journey of trying to find spiritual resources that are credible in the midst of the violence. But also, as an abuse survivor, I mean, I was just riddled with rage and flashbacks and nightmares and despair and suicidality. I mean, this is kind of the story that I tell in the book. I mean, at 30 years old, externally, I was a professor at the Claremont School of Theology and trying to act the role of being a person of faith and a family man and a professor and be respectable. But inside, I was absolutely ravaged by all of this internal war of feelings and self-destruction. And so, trying to find spiritual resources that both cultivated psychological well-being and just functional, regulation, but also that that kept my spirit alive and kept me going and finding ways to be resilient and hopeful and even compassionate in the midst of the horrors of recovering from abuse. That's the context of my journey. Absolutely.
I'm floored by um, so many things in what you're just saying, and I'm realizing I feel like I'm going to confession for a moment here because I realize, oh, I haven't read your most recent book, and and the truth is, I didn't because I felt like it was too much for like when your book was published, I was dealing with the decline of and subsequent death of my father-in-law. And so I was dealing with a lot of grief that I was just kind of in a state of being emotionally raw.
Mhm.
And and I thought there are way too many connections between your story and my story.
Mhm.
And I doubted my capacity to be with it in a way that I would want to be with it. And so I remember making the decision, I'm not reading this right now.
Mhm.
And I still need to do that. And I think it would probably be good for me now that I'm not in a state of just like such rawness and vulnerability that, comes at the height of the grieving process and when you're going through the dying process with a loved one. So,
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And actually the very first page of the book is a disclaimer, just kind of naming, hey, that this book tells a hard story.
yeah,
And so and so really trust yourself, whether you're ready to read a story like this or even as you get into it. And I genuinely believe that our soul knows what it needs. Our soul is always evolving for our well-being and our spiritual vitality, and if we listen to it with care, like listening and saying, you know what, I'm emotionally raw, I am not ready for a story like this,
yeah.
absolutely to listen and tend to that. And the time will come whenever it's ready, and or ever, but that's fine. You're living the spiritual practice by tending to your own soul's yearnings there. Yeah.
One of the things in my experience of I don't want to get into details, but was just betrayal.
Mm,
That like I still, however many years later, just the because of experiencing an abusive environment in my home, but then it also experiencing um, grooming, etc., with someone from the church. Uh, that the betrayal has loomed so large in my life, from the time of childhood to, the in my 50s now, like, and I still feel times where I feel like I'm reeling from that betrayal.
mm,
Um, and and I am wondering a few things about how you dealt with your search for how you dealt with the betrayal and how you also moved to searching for spiritual resources. Like, can you say more about like what is it in you that even just gave you the spark of saying, I know that there's meaning or I know that there's more that I'm seeking to understand. Like, how did you make that movement from because you didn't go in completely into collapse and victimhood, or you wouldn't be here. And you didn't go into perpetration, which is a lot of people who undergo abusive situations do that. So can you speak to like how'd you do what you did?
Well, absolutely in fits and starts. I mean, this is stumbling and three steps back and two steps forward, and absolutely. So, but first of all, I absolutely identify with that sense of betrayal. I mean, I was raped in my bedroom by my maternal step grandfather, and I had a picture of Jesus on the wall that my mom had put there, kind of praying up to God. And it was like, Jesus, God, whoever you're praying to, make this stop. I mean, why do you let this happen literally before your eyes? I mean, I was looking at that painting, that picture on my wall, and that deep sense of God is not here. God, either God doesn't see, or God doesn't care, or I'm not important, or I deserve this somehow and I'm being punished. I mean, a deep sense of that. And I also had a betrayal in the church as well, by a priest. But a couple things. I mean, one, alongside of all of that betrayal, I did have little moments. In fact, the very first chapter of the book it describes one moment I had in the church where there was just this, out of the blue. I mean, I can't explain it, but there's just this sense that there was some kind of a cosmic reality that embraced me with compassion. Just, didn't have words necessarily, doesn't have, an image, not a Father God, the sky who controls history, but just some sense that there is some reality that right now it feels like this reality sees me, hears me, gets my pain, maybe can't do anything about it, but is willing to just embrace me in a blanket of compassion. And just that little spark of that is like, I want to know that. I want more of that. And it was like a quest to try to find that. Now, my own journey was ravaged with suicidality. I mean, I ended up, 2 years into my professorship, I almost died driving off a cliff and ended up in a mental hospital, just completely ravaged by, trying to kill myself and the rage. And literally in the middle of the mental hospital, as I just became uncorked, I just couldn't hold it all together anymore. I was just ready to rage at this world that had betrayed me, and just kind of let it so badly that the orderlies had to bring me into the padded room, and toss me in there because I was just out of control. And as I just kind of spewed it, just took all that rage and said, you know what? My rage is here for a reason. I'm just going to honor it. I'm just going to dance. It was kind of like Jacob dancing with the angel, except it was a dancing with this demon of rage. I'm just gonna. Why are you so inflaming me? What are you so enraged about? And it kind of did this to the point where it finally just screamed, you were abused, and you really were. It's really true, and you have to face it. And as soon as I did that, it's like it just melted. And I just kind of fell on the floor in the padded room of a mental hospital. And once again, out of nowhere, it's like this ocean of compassion just kind of emerged and wrapped me up. And I just laid in it so still, I didn't want to move a muscle. And it was just, even in the midst of the rage and the horror in a mental hospital, there is this sacred compassion that is meeting me. And so it was like, I will give my life to know that more fully.
Yeah.
That was the inspiration. That was the spark. That was the drive. I mean, if it's there, I want to know it. If it's not really there, then life's not worth living anyway. So let's find out for sure.
Yeah. I My story was a little different in that I wasn't conscious of, I'm not sure what language you'd use, but um, whether you would describe that experience in the church and then later when you were on the floor of the padded room, like, I don't know if you would call that felt presence, or you would call it like a moment of intimacy with the divine, or what language you would use. But I definitely sort of felt like I was in a desert in terms of connection with the divine. And so I had developed a lot of misconceptions about, in my mind, the only way I could sort of make sense of what happened in my family and happened in the home, and then what happened, with someone from the church, was just that it was like if there is a God, one, I don't know if there is a God, and if there is, I'm really, really mad because I feel like he doesn't either he's like rejected me or he's just like decided not to answer my prayers or like something that I don't understand and I'm pissed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I really turned away from anything to do with religion, with God, with spiritual. I didn't even know, hadn't even heard of the term spirituality at that point in my life. I would not have any reference for understanding what spirituality even referred to. And then however many, but proceeded to live my life in such a way as like a functioning victim. Like if you asked me what I felt, I couldn't tell you what I felt. I couldn't tell you what I needed. Like I was so like I don't know how to even describe it, but almost like I remember one particular moment when this guy who had been grooming me, took me on a camping trip and he decided it was time to get naked and I was sitting on a log and it was just the two of us in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere. And I remember so deeply like wanting to disappear, like
Mhm.
as if
Mhm.
I could reverse being back through my belly button, like
Mhm.
in that
Mhm.
moment, I wanted to reverse exist. I wanted
Mhm.
to. And so it was like I went through life for decades in that kind of like that sort of internal. And so I was very much like easily people who didn't necessarily care what someone else was thinking or someone else was doing. I was easily influenced. I was just basically pushed around,
Mhm.
you know. And then at the point where I was like, okay, something in my life is not it's not working. Something in my life needs to change. And that's when I was introduced to Sufism and
Mhm.
Islam. And so the first point that I kind of connect with that felt presence that you're describing was when I was doing the prayer on the prayer rug.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was just felt like I come home, you know.
Mhm.
And so that was like the starting point of me like developing the faith and the strength to face
Mhm.
what I had experienced and the impact that it had, the unbelievably profound and comprehensive impact that it had on my life. Um, so all of which is to say, what those moments and those um, felt presence, those moments of connection, those moments of relationship that gave you meaning and purpose. Um, how did you pursue more of those once you walked out of or maybe once you walked out of the padded room, maybe while you're in the padded room, but
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, but my gosh, I'm just so moved by your story, Habib, too. And I mean, it's not exactly, but it's very parallel. I can really appreciate that and the power of feeling like you finally come home connected to some reality there that is with you and has compassion and care and gives then the resilience to be able to go and face the traumas and follow a path of healing and recovery. I mean, that's just profoundly moving. And my experience is, when I'm in those moments and when I was there, it's like you know what you know what you know. There is nothing in this world that can tell you that this is not real, that this isn't true, that this is the absolute solid ground of life and being. And if we could stay in this zone or in this connection, we could take on anything. I mean, we could love anybody. It's just like this deep connection with this amazingly spiritual reality. And then we walk out of the room and it's like, and all of a sudden, the irritations come back or the
yeah.
insecurities and the anxieties. And so for me, it became a constant toggle between, tending to all of the trauma symptoms, going to therapy, working with the emotions, trying to find ways to regulate, engaging in practices that of healing the memories, of facing the trauma in ways that could bring healing out of that instead of just re-traumatization, and bringing that into prayer and trying to bringing that into connection with that sacred reality. That was the lifelong journey. I mean, it was 20 years of just continually toggling between being in that deep connection and then having rages or having despairs or questions and or memories that come back, and then just, okay, I'm going to bring that into this presence, and allow that presence to hold it and metabolize it, and that became really my spiritual work. And it also involved a lot of deconstruction. I mean, because for me, the God, it was the same God that you were praying to. Like, God, why did you let this happen? Why didn't you stop this? I prayed to you, nightly, to make this go away, and you never answered my prayers. And so that deep sense of betrayal by, this God that could have done something and didn't. I had to really deconstruct that God too. I mean, essentially, that God had to die inside of me. The idea that there is some, super being out there that can intervene and control history, but chooses not to, maybe because of, for our own good, or because of free will, or because we're going to grow from this, or because he has his reasons that we just cannot comprehend. I was really influenced by Melissa Raphael, a post-Holocaust theologian, who said, that kind of a view of God sounds a lot more like Hitler than it does like a benevolent being. And maybe that patriarchal God needs to die, that there is, that the real God is really much more a maternal presence that is with us in compassion, side by side, and helping us to endure and find capacities of resilience in the midst of it. And so that was a radical reframing of who God is, and an old God that had to die for a new God to be known from within.
Yeah, yeah. I'm smiling because I'm remembering my own struggle with that. And I'm wondering, two questions immediately come to mind is what practices helped you with that? And then of course from that and your previous comment, like tell me more about your process of spiritual healing. So one at a time. Um, I know when I was with a teacher that I have the utmost, highest regard for. Her name is Dr. Rosina Fauzia Al-Rawi. And I did a 40-day retreat with her. And one of the things that she told me to do was to recite Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And I had to recite that 21 times
Mm,
between every verse
mm,
as I was reading a chapter of the Quran. And and at first it was like there was this steel plate, like it was like I couldn't, like I just couldn't do it. And
mm.
then and then eventually it shifted, and then it became like this being washed. And it really helped me release my misconceptions of God from childhood experience and reorient myself to God is first and foremost merciful, compassionate, loving. So did you have any particular practices that helped you in that deconstruction of the God of your childhood and that reforming of relationship with God and having a greater sense of who you believe God to be now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Your teacher reminds me of one of mine. His name was the Reverend Dr. James Earl Massey, when I went to college, and he was one of my first contemplative teachers. And his words to me that I still remember were, he said, "Frank, God's first and last and only impulse for you and everyone else is always compassion.
Mm,
And if you know this, you know everything." I mean,
mm,
and that has been kind of of a mantra for me. And that's exactly like what you're describing, the Bismillah, Yerrahman, Yerrahim, and
Yeah.
the merciful and the compassionate. And tell me what I've had another Muslim colleague who shared with me, Rahman and Rahim, the most merciful and the most compassionate. And I said, well, what's the difference, right? And I mean, they both come from the Arabic root for womb. They're both like this womb-like regard. What's the difference between all merciful and all compassionate? And he said, Rahman is that cosmic universal compassion that sustains the entire universe, that it spreads and permeates all being. And Rahim is God's compassion for you in particular, who sees us individually and knows us by name and knows the numbers of hairs on our head and walks with us. And this combination of this expansive
Yeah.
reality of compassion and this very particular, it's just beautiful. I just love that. So that is actually one of my mantras as Bismillah Rahman Rahim as well.
Wow, beautiful. Yes,
Beautiful.
there's this saying that a black on the darkest night, the smallest black ant
Mm.
on a black rock on a dark night does not escape.
Oh,
That God knows that ant knows every detail. And yes, that there is singular and universal mercy in present at all times.
oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, even on the darkest night, on the darkest rock, the blackest ant that's hidden in there, God sees every detail of that and holds with compassion. I love that. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for me, the major practice that helped me into this was a radical reframe from all of the things in me that feel like they disconnect me from that reality.
Mhm.
When I start feeling the angers or the despairs or the anxieties or the rage at God even, and just how could you possibly do this? I early on were taught spiritual practices that those were bad, that those were wrong, that those were sinful, those were signs of spiritual immaturity, and they needed to suppress them. I need to try to make them, let go of them and let them
Mhm.
dissipate out into the world, or need to try to, talk myself out of them through some contrary practice. And that was for me was like trying to push a buoy underwater. I mean, as much as I said, okay, I shouldn't be angry at God, if I'm really spiritual, I would be at peace with God. That rage would just come back up every time I would see a picture of Jesus. Like that's the one that
Mhm.
didn't come, you know. And so the practice that became for me a life changer was when I stopped fighting all of those interior realities within me and started recognizing, well, what if those different emotions and drives and impulses were there for a reason, actually came from some place? I mean, there's a reason why I respond to that way, and that these are really like cries of the soul that are aching to be heard instead of being manipulated or suppressed or managed. And so
Mhm.
when I said, okay, I'm enraged at God, let's explore that. What is underneath that rage at God? And began to face, well, wait a second. I mean, it makes no sense that God was this perfect being that could have stopped this and didn't do that. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. And so brought that into the reality and into that space where I experienced the God I knew for real, that God of compassion that I met in the church or that I met in that padded room. Let's bring that into that space. And when I did that, it dissipated all of those images of God. It's like, no, that just melts away, and something new replaced it. So it says constant turning with compassion to our own interior experience and bringing it into the presence of the reality that we know in our bones when we are back home with ourselves. That practice, I call that kind of a compassion practice. That's the practice that was the central most healing thing that I'm engaged in.
Mhm. So that's kind of an answer to both the question about how you shifted your how your relationship and conception of God shifted, but also your means of spiritual healing. It's your kind of your answer was the same answer to both questions, which was around this accepting what is, and
Mhm.
then the compassion practice, which was for you to not resist the darkness or the rage or the whatever that was, to be in compassionate relationship and bring this I'm going to use the language that you use in the compassion practices, the sensing the sacred, with this, you bringing that together with your sense of the sacred, your sense of that God as being present and being compassionate that you experienced in the church and in the padded room and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, this is one of the invitations of spirituality and of contemplative practice is this recognition that we do have these rages and we do have these anxieties and despairs and heaviness and whatnot, that we usually try to suppress, but that's not all of who we are either. I mean,
Yeah.
that deeper down, there is this self essence, this spiritual essence within us, whatever you call it, the true
Mm.
self or the imago Dei or the immortal diamond or the Buddha nature. But there is this deep essence within us that is our true self. And when we come back home to that, we realize that we have spiritual capacities that are deeper than the rages or the anxieties and the despair. And one of the invitations of contemplative practice and spirituality is helping us move from when we are just enmeshed in those kinds of inner reactivities to
Mm.
cultivate that contemplative awareness of accessing that deeper true self that can hold and be with the angers and the irritations, the rages at God or whatever, and hold them with curiosity, hold them with compassionate care, and from that deeper self. And then from there, see what is underneath this that needs to be healed or is aching to be heard or aching to be restored, and allowing that sacred presence to meet us at that space. Life changing, fundamentally restorative spiritual practice. I think that's one of the deep gifts that spirituality has to
Yeah.
offer us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my experience of spiritual healing, I I experience a similar resistance, whether it's doing Sufi healing or whether it's doing internal family systems therapy. Like whenever I try and if I'm just going to like sit with the rage, or if I'm going to sit with the shame, or sit with the part that's collapsed, or sit with you get the idea, right? I can go on and on. We humans, we have
Right.
this is all part of the experience, right? So if I try and sit with that directly, I almost always hit a wall.
Mhm.
Like 99.9% of the time, it's like a replication on some level of the freeze experience.
Mhm.
And so it's like I am in a fog,
Mhm.
like just gray fog. There's a wall of gray fog, and I cannot get to the other side. And if I try and like be with that and like what's underneath that and what is if I try and personify it or try and give it, assign it colors or images or any of that, like fog. That's my pat response in my system that I have developed to survive my life is the fog. So what I have found, it works a whole lot better for me is I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling this. All right. Yeah, I'm feeling it. Okay. How can I foster my sense of connectivity to the divine?
Mhm.
And then I can make a shift where it's like allowing my sense of connection to the divine and bringing what you're saying, bringing the sense of connection to the divine to um, the situation, whatever that might be, or the pain, or the wound, or so on. Um, but if I go to the wound instead of to the divine, I get nowhere. I have to
Hmm.
go to the divine. I have
Hmm.
to go to the divine first.
Hmm.
With the awareness of the experience of the wound or whatever. Do you have any thoughts, any tips, any what does that strike in you when I share that experience?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I can totally relate. For me, it wasn't a fog. For me, it was like this castle that was 6 inches thick, that would just come down and say, like a wall. I mean, it was like a fortress. It's like, between me and the pain or the emotion or whatever, it's like, we are not going there. We're going to do everything we can to absolutely keep you from being there. Mayday, mayday, it ain't happening.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I totally relate. And so what I found maybe similar was that if I try to push past that wall, it ain't happening. If I try to, hey, you know what? Apparently healing happens if we're over there, or we need to do that. That wall would absolutely not budge.
Yeah.
And what I needed to do, first of all, was okay, well, instead of trying to be with the wound or be with the rage, I need to be with what's real. And what's
Mhm.
real is that there's a wall here, or in your case, a fog. So my
Mhm.
invitation was, well, let me just take a step back then from the wall and just be
Mhm.
with the wall and just access that deeper self in me. Okay, I'm not going to fight the wall. I'm not going to try to push past the wall. I'm not going to try to make the wall go away. I'm just going to breathe into a grounded awareness that this wall is here and this wall means well, and it needs something, and it is asking for my care right now. And so kind of stepping back into my spiritual essence, where my spiritual capacities for compassion and curiosity and groundedness and openness, but to the wall, not to the wound on the other side of the wall. And that would be a place where I would have access to the sacred too. Like, okay, how would my sense of that sacred, compassionate reality be with me here and be with this wall, first of all? And then
Mhm.
I would tend to the wall. Why is the wall here? Why is the wall keeping me from the pain on the other side? And for me, it's usually because if you go over there, you're going to be swallowed into an abyss of pain, and you're going
Yeah.
to not get out of bed for weeks, and it's going to be nothing but re-traumatizing. And then,
Yeah.
well, of course, no wonder this wall is here. That means you're
Yeah.
protecting me from getting mired into something that seems absolutely like an abyss of pain. That's not going to be helpful to me either. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The point of being with the pain is not just to be re-traumatized and re-experience it all and get
Mhm.
sucked into it. The point is to be with it in a grounded, healing, restorative way. And so then I say to that wall, if there were possible, I agree with you. If we're going to get swallowed into abyss, let's not go there. But
Yeah.
what if we could be with that, whatever's on the other side, in a grounded, compassionate, even connected to the sacred way? Would that help you allow me to be with what's on the other side of that wall? And yeah, if you could do that, great. And so, like you, it's like, okay, so me armored with my sense of connection with the sacred, let's now see what's on the other side of the wall. It's like the fog and the wall. Just want to make sure that when we are with the pain, we're going to do it from a grounded, spiritually resilient, connected, restorative way, and not in a way that's just going to get sucked into the pain.
Yeah.
That's my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm curious if how that resonates or what that brings up for you. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that the um I don't remember. I'm trying to think about, well, what is my process? And is my process is what you're saying, which is being with the wall, like being with your sense of connection to the divine and the wall simultaneously. And I feel like it's my, I don't necessarily have that consciously as part of my process as being present with the wall itself, or the fog. With in my case, wall definitely fits just as well because it's almost as like the fog has this real denseness, like
Mm-hmm.
that you can't get to the other side of. So, um, I feel like rather than being so like present with the wall in a state of connection to the divine, it's more as if in a state of connection to the divine allows me to be present with the reason for the wall. So
Mhm.
like if it's the pain or if it's the hurt or if it's the shame, it's like my what experience is more like, okay, if I can be with, for me, Allah, if I can be with Allah, um, and have that sense of connection to Allah, then the pain, uh, it's not like the depth of it or it loses some of its power over me, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then it's like then I can that um, that reduction in volume, so to speak, of the pain or the wound or the whatever the case might be, the volume gets turned down that the volume turns is turned up on the sense of connection with the divine, and then I can access, or I'm open enough to receive like a key teaching or some insight, or which very often for me is the same thing, which leads me to my next question. What is your key teaching? But I know that oftentimes what's on the other side of the wall, um, and if I can bring my sense of the connection to God to the pain or the wound, that there there is this, like the key and oftentimes for me is knowing that I'm Habib. Which, for those of you who are not familiar with Arabic, Habib is the word for beloved. So
Mhm.
it's the one who carries the love of
Mhm.
God. So one who is loved by God is referred to as the beloved. So one who carries the
Mhm.
love of God is loved by God. Um, and I think that that was such a central misconception from my childhood experience,
Mhm.
that oftentimes the key teaching for me is once again, oh no, it's not that God doesn't love you, God does love you. And so I feel like that's that key teaching for me is just the centrality of God's love for each and every one of us, that each and every one of us are the beloved, lowercase b, and that
Mhm.
God is beloved, capital B. So what's your key teaching?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very similar, and I love you kind of talking about your process as well because it resonates with mine as also, and also with how trauma is healed. I mean, one of the key things about trauma recovery and healing is that going back to the places of pain just to feel that pain again is only re-traumatizing. That is not helpful to our systems. It's not restorative. It doesn't help us grow. And so those fogs or those walls, they mean they're good.
Yeah.
They know that if we just get sucked back into it, that it's going to be re-traumatizing. And so, but on the other hand, when we can be with those memories or with those hard feelings, but from a grounded spiritual essence, restorative place that can be with it with compassion and give it care, like we are when we are connected to the Allah or to the sacred within us, then it's profoundly healing and restorative of those places of pain. And what I hear from you is that when you're able to connect with that sacred essence, it's like the reason for the fog, it dissipates. It doesn't need to be there anymore because yeah, that's where the healing power is, to be with those hard things from
Yeah.
that grounded, resilient place. And it's like the sunlight of that connection just
Yeah.
melts away the fog. So the fog doesn't need to be there to protect us away from that anymore. I mean, that feels very similar to my experience as well. Um,
Yeah.
and in terms of the core thing for me, it's very similar for you. It is that we are held in compassion, period. And
Yeah.
partly for me, I mean, sexual abuse, one of the things that comes to us is this profound sense of shame. I mean, I lived with the shame that I was excrement. I mean, that what had happened to me soiled me into my bones, into my tissues were damaged. And not only that, but if anybody in the world knew anything about that, they would immediately be repulsed by me, which is why I had to hide all of my past and all of my pain under this professional facade of trying to be the perfect professor or the perfect person of faith or whatever, because of the profound shame that I was absolutely untouchable in my bones. And the antidote to that was like in the padded room or like in the church. It's that sense that in God's presence, in the presence of that maternal, sacred source, that source looks at us, sees it all, and holds it with nothing but compassion. Nothing but compassion. You are loved, you are held, you are seen, even in the pain that you have known, even in the shame that you carry. I see it and I am undaunted by it, nonplussed, completely with you in compassion. That's my primary ground. And this corollary to that is, and when we know that, we can hold in ourselves or in others any form of pain, any difficult emotion, any shame. It all can be held. It can all be faced. It can all be companioned. It can all be carried in this absolute sacred compassion that holds everything, period. That's my solid ground.
Yeah. It's, as you know, I don't need to tell you this, and I've mentioned this on other podcasts. We've all experienced some kind of trauma.
Mhm.
Many of us, it seems like the world today is a world where if we turn on the news, we are faced with unbelievable life circumstances. There's so much trauma in the world, and people continually struggle with how do they deal with their own trauma, um, and how do they care for themselves in the face of all that's happening with them individually, but also with all that's happening globally. And I know that you have devoted much of your professional life as to the centrality of this teaching around compassion, around God as compassion, around God that you are held in compassion, period. So I'm wondering if you were going to distill some tips for somebody who's struggling with self-care, somebody who's struggling to hold what they're going through, um, in a compassionate way. Are there any particular suggestions or tips you might have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the tip would be gentle with yourself. That there is a reason why it's so hard. Whatever the challenge is, the deep shame that you might carry, or the self-judgment that you might carry, or the severity of the rage or anxiety that just feels that is untouchable. Whatever it is,
Mhm.
it's there for a reason. You were born that way. It came from someplace. In its deepest root, it's rooted in suffering. It's rooted in pain. And so instead of judging ourselves for that and beating ourselves up or trying to manage it, turn and recognize there's a reason I feel this way. And
Mhm.
it came from heartache. It came from some deep suffering of some form. And have compassion for that, even if you don't know precisely what it is. Just a
Mhm.
awareness that, yeah, something in me knew such pain that it now takes the form of this shame or this judgment. So, yeah, be gentle with ourselves. We're not bad for what we feel. It's actually rooted in suffering. And when we can connect with that, our hearts can open with compassion towards ourselves. No wonder I carry so much shame. No wonder I carry so much rage. No wonder, given what I've been through.
Mhm.
It's like really hearing this Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He just one of my, I love him, but he's a man of profound compassion. But he would say that he could never hate anybody whose story he had heard,
Yeah.
which is to say, when you really hear and know the circumstances, the pain, what the challenges people faced, and how they struggled to overcome, when you really hear that, your heart opens to them. And the same is true for us. Let's recognize that there's a story underneath everything that we are struggling with internally,
Mhm.
and be open to what is that story? What is that suffering? And when we hear that and honor that, we can have gentleness and compassion for ourselves.
Mm. It's almost like you answered my next question before I got a chance to answer it, which was I was going to ask, like, how do you make the connection between this compassion for the individual self and compassion in relation to what's happening globally? How do you bring those together? And and it sounds as if you're saying if if you can be present in a compassionate way, then you can hold all of it with compassion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we could recognize that all forms of, violence and vitriol and all of that, that is so hard. It's so hard to live with in the world that we are, but
Mhm.
recognize all of it is rooted in suffering. It's all rooted in deep pain, which gives us the capacity for having some curiosity and compassion for what's underneath, what makes this person act this way or believe this way, or hold this ideology, or that can seem so challenging and offensive. So it's somehow it's rooted in their pain. It's somehow they're doing the best they can to try to navigate the suffering that they have known, and it's coming out in these ways. So it opens up the possibility to have compassion, for all persons, for whatever is the pain underneath that. That also means though that there is a place where we can have compassion for someone, but also need to draw boundaries against dangerous and destructive behavior. So
Right.
from a survivor of sexual abuse, I might be able to come to a place of having compassion for the priests, the suffering that gave rise to the behavior in that priest or in this perpetrator over here. But that in no ways minimizes the pain of what they do, and or the danger that they pose to other people. And so we need to also be bold and courageous and very clear about sequestering people who are dangerous and going to violate people, and keeping the vulnerable protected, and doing what we can to create the boundaries that are going to be safe for all persons. But we could do that and still have compassion for the persons that are so mired in their own pain and suffering that they cannot free themselves from the destructive behavior that they are enmeshed in. Both could be true at the same time.
Yeah. To distinguish between the action and the personhood. Yeah. I recall a relationship with a relative. I will leave this individual unnamed, but this person's behavior toward the opposite gender was inexcusable.
Yeah.
Inexcusable. And yet, when I was able to sit with the person behind or underneath all of that, I was like, it took me a while, but I realized, oh, he's just a little boy
Mm-hmm.
yearning to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that did not excuse his behavior.
Exactly.
And it's right to say no.
Exactly.
This is not okay. Um,
Exactly.
and yet, if we can be in a sense of connection to something greater than ourselves, and a sense of compassion for the individual, we can often recognize what else is going on there.
Absolutely. That's exactly, yeah, what I mean by both can be true at the same
Yeah.
time, that we can have genuine compassion for the boy in him and what he went through and who is feeling unloved and alone and in a world that's telling him, these terrible ideologies. We can have deep compassion. And at the same time, it's inexcusable and needs to be corrected, and boundaries need to be put in place and need to be confronted. But to do that and still have compassion for the boy at the same time. And
Yeah.
and my experience is when we can treat persons with that kind of compassion, it has the possibility of then melting some of that severe, egregiously bad behavior. And
Mhm.
they're able to access a little bit more of their own true self within them, and that's the hope of transformation. When we just shame them, that's only going to further give pain to that little boy inside and only entrench all the more the terrible behavior. But when
Yeah.
we can have love and care and compassion, even when we're having boundaries, it has the potential of melting the person that's carrying these egregious behaviors and beliefs. So
Yeah.
the power of love, compassion. That's our deepest hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for sharing from your personal journey and your personal experience and being so honest and courageous and open and authentic. Any parting words, any last words of wisdom?
Well, just deep gratitude to you, Habib, for creating a space to be able to bring these types of things and to talk about, and also just to recognize that it's a journey. It's a journey that we are all on. I would not have been able to tell my story so publicly, 30 years ago. Far, far from it. It's a
Yeah.
journey of healing, a journey of recovery, and we give ourselves patience and grace, and as we all are trying to find that deepest self and that connection with the sacred that restores us. So.
Yes. Well, I find you and your who you are as a person as a testament to God's grace
Mm.
and inspirational, and I trust that others will also find the same in your story. And so thank you for just tethering yourself so strongly around compassion and knowing that God holds us in compassion always. Yeah. So thank you.
The first and last impulse always, compassion. Yeah.
First and last impulse always. Compassion. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go, take one breath, please, to just pause and reflect for a moment on this conversation with Frank and what sticks with you from this conversation. Again, Frank, thank you for the inspiration to embody compassion, to be compassion, to carry compassion for ourselves and others in all the world. May something you heard today help you connect with the light in your own heart. May you grow in compassion,
Mm.
clarity, and courage. May you find your way again and again back home to yourself, back home to the divine, however you name it. If today's conversation spoke to you, please like, share, and comment on this episode. Please follow Beyond Names. To make an appointment with me, please visit habibburger.com. Until next time, may you be light. May you consciously participate in growing your light, and may you share your light. Peace be with you.